To see someone's true character, pay attention to just two things. Have you ever looked at someone, maybe a friend, a colleague, or even a stranger, and wondered, who are they, really? We live in a world where people wear masks every day. They smile, they charm, they say all the right things. But behind the polished words and friendly gestures, how many of them are truly authentic? How many are just playing a role, hiding their real nature beneath a carefully crafted illusion? The truth is, appearances can be deceiving. A warm smile can mask cold intentions. A kind word can be spoken from a place of calculation rather than sincerity. And if you've ever been betrayed, manipulated, or disappointed by someone you once trusted, you already know this lesson all too well. But here's the good news. You don't need a psychology degree to see through the masks. You don't need years of experience to understand what kind of person you're really dealing with. Because the truth, the raw, unfiltered truth, always reveals itself in the smallest details. There are two simple but powerful clues that expose a person's character completely. They are not complicated, nor are they hidden beneath layers of psychology jargon. They are right in front of us, woven into the everyday moments we often overlook, and once you recognize them, you'll never look at people the same way again. Imagine having the ability to instantly sense whether someone is truly kind or just pretending, whether they are trustworthy or merely putting on a show, whether they are the kind of person you should welcome into your life or quietly walk away from. This skill can save you from heartbreak, it can protect you from deception, and most importantly, it can help you surround yourself with people who are genuine, loyal, and worthy of your trust. In today's video, we're going to reveal these two hidden signals, the ones that separate sincerity from pretense, integrity from manipulation. And as you listen, you might even start to notice something surprising, not just about others but about yourself. Begin with your subscribe to the Mindful Sphere channel. Here, we explore the deep truths of human nature, personal growth, and spiritual wisdom. Content that challenges the way you think, expands your perspective, and helps you navigate life with clarity and confidence. Now, if you're ready to uncover what's hidden beneath the surface, let's dive in. 1. How a person treats those who can't return the favor. The great Confucius once said, "The strength of a nation derives from the integrity of the home." He believed that true virtue is not displayed in grand acts of heroism, but in the small, everyday interactions we have with those around us. And one of the greatest tests of character, he taught, is how we treat those who can do nothing for us in return. In ancient Rome, there was a well-respected senator named Lucius Cornelius. He was known for his eloquence in the Senate and his generosity toward fellow statesmen. But one day, a visiting Greek philosopher, Epictetus, observed him in the marketplace. Lucius had stopped at a food stall, and when the elderly vendor hesitated while counting change, the senator's warm demeanor shifted in an instant. His voice grew sharp, his face twisted in frustration, and he scolded the poor man publicly for wasting his time. Epictetus, who had once been a slave before earning his freedom through wisdom, merely smiled and said, "A man's character is shown not in the way he treats his equals, but in the way he treats those beneath him." This single observation spread through Rome like wildfire. Lucius, the man admired in the Senate, had been exposed by a single moment of impatience with a powerless merchant. His reputation never fully recovered, because the truth had been revealed. He was kind only when it benefited him. And so, the lesson remains timeless. Pay attention not to how someone speaks to the powerful, but how they behave when no one is watching, when kindness offers no reward. I want to tell you a story, not from books, not from history, but from the well-worn paths of life itself. Many years ago, when I was a much younger man, I worked for a small trucking company. It wasn't glamorous work, but it put food on the table. Every morning, before the sun had even begun to rise, I would load heavy crates into the back of a truck, my hands raw from the cold steel. There was a man who owned the company, Franklin Carter. He was a tall, imposing figure, always dressed in a sharp suit, always busy, always in a hurry. People spoke about him with a mix of admiration and fear. A self-made man, they called him. Tough but fair. Fair? Well, that depended on who you were. See, Franklin had a habit of treating the world in two very different ways. If you were a client, someone with money, someone with power, oh, he was all charm. He would shake your hand, laugh at your jokes, and even pat you on the back like an old friend. But if you were just another worker, just another set of hands lifting crates and driving trucks, well, that was a different story. One winter morning I watched as a young man named Tommy, barely 19, fresh to the job, accidentally spilled a box of supplies on the warehouse floor. It wasn't anything major, just a few scattered cans and some broken packaging, but Franklin saw it happen, and in front of everyone, his managers, his clients, and all of us workers, he humiliated that boy. He called him careless, lazy, a waste of payroll. He made sure we all knew how much he despised incompetence. Tommy, his face burning red, nodded, apologized, and bent down to clean up the mess. He was a good kid. He didn't talk back. He didn't argue. I saw the look in Franklin's eyes. Disgust. Superiority. A man who had no time for those beneath him. Now, life has a funny way of leveling the playing field. A few years passed, and the world changed. The trucking company hit hard times. Franklin made some bad business deals, took a few risks that didn't pay off. Before long, his company was drowning in debt. His investors pulled out, his offices, once filled with men eager to please him, emptied like a sinking ship. One day I heard a rumor Franklin had been forced to sell off his business and was looking for work himself. And then something happened that I will never forget. I was at a diner, sitting at the counter, drinking my coffee, when I heard a familiar voice behind me. I turned and there he was, Franklin Carter. But he wasn't in a suit anymore. His once neatly combed hair was now streaked with gray. His eyes, once sharp and filled with authority, seemed tired. And, standing in front of him, Tommy. Only Tommy wasn't a kid anymore. He was a manager now, running logistics for one of the biggest distribution companies in town. He had done well for himself. Franklin, once the mighty boss, the man who never had time for small people, was now asking for a job. I sat in silence, watching as Franklin stumbled through his words, explaining how he had fallen on hard times and just needed an opportunity. And Tommy? He listened patiently. When Franklin finished speaking, there was a long pause. And then Tommy smiled. Not out of revenge, not out of smugness, but with something rare, something precious, true kindness. He reached out, shook Franklin's hand, and said, "Everyone deserves a second chance. You start Monday." Now, I want you to think about this. Tommy had every reason to turn him away, to remind Franklin of every cruel word he had spoken, to let him suffer the way he once made others suffer. But he didn't. Because kindness, real kindness, doesn't keep score. It doesn't demand repayment. It isn't given only when it benefits you. It's what you do when no one is watching, when there is no applause, when the only person who will ever know what you did is you. So now I ask you, how do you treat people when there is nothing to gain? It's easy to be kind when the world is watching, when there's recognition, reward, admiration. But the true test of character is how you treat those who can do nothing for you. Namely, it's the cashier at the grocery store, the janitor in your office building, the tired waitress at the diner. Do you smile? Do you say thank you? Do you acknowledge them as fellow human beings? Or do you look through them like they're invisible? Because in the end, life has a way of revealing the truth. The powerful become weak, the young grow old, the tables turn, and when they do, will you be remembered as someone who lifted others up, or as someone who stepped over them, never realizing that one day you'd be the one who needed a hand? Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a moment where someone's true character was revealed either for better or worse? Maybe a time when a small act of kindness changed everything? Share your thoughts in the comments. Let's learn from each other, because wisdom is meant to be shared, and if this story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to the Mindful Sphere channel, because together we can uncover the truths that make life richer, wiser, and more meaningful. 2. The psychological value of keeping promises. The great Roman philosopher Seneca once said, "A promise is a debt unpaid." In ancient times, a person's word was as binding as any contract. Honor was not measured by wealth or power but by integrity, the ability to stand by one's word even when it was difficult. In the 4th century BC, a great ruler named King Agesilaus of Sparta was renowned not for his military strength, but for his unyielding reliability. Unlike other kings who made grand proclamations and broke them when circumstances changed, Agesilaus believed that a man's worth was measured by his ability to keep a promise. One day, a neighboring city asked for Sparta's help in battle. They needed soldiers, weapons, and supplies. Agesilaus, after careful thought, gave his word, "Sparta will stand with you." But before the armies could march, a sudden crisis struck his own land. His advisors begged him to withdraw, to break the promise for the sake of Sparta's security. But Agesilaus refused. He had given his word. He had made a commitment, and in his eyes, that meant more than any excuse. So he sent the troops as promised. Sparta was left vulnerable, but Agesilaus believed that a broken word was a greater weakness than a weakened army. And what happened? The neighboring city, moved by his honor, became Sparta's most loyal ally for generations. Agesilaus understood a simple truth. Trust is the foundation of all relationships, and once it's broken, it is nearly impossible to rebuild. Even today, that lesson remains the same. Whether in leadership, friendships, or family, a promise is more than words, it is a reflection of who we are. Now let me tell you a story, a real one that I lived. I once had a friend named William. We met when we were both young, full of dreams, full of energy. Back then, we had nothing but time and a promise to build something great together. We used to sit on the porch, drinking coffee, talking about how one day we'd run our own business. No more working under someone else's thumb. No more punching clocks for pennies. Just two friends, working side by side, making something of ourselves. And then one day the opportunity came. A small shop was up for sale. Not much, just an old corner store with creaky wooden floors and shelves half empty from neglect. But to us, it was everything. We shook hands that night under a street lamp right there on the sidewalk. "We'll do this together," William said. "I give you my word." I believed him. Each scraped together our savings. Every dime, every favor, every penny we could find. I worked extra shifts. William sold his old truck. We put everything we had into that shop. But just before we signed the final papers, something changed. William stopped answering my calls. He started making excuses. "Just give me a little more time. Something's come up. I'll be there soon." Then one evening I walked past a restaurant downtown and saw him inside, laughing, drinking, spending money like nothing had ever happened. I went in, sat down across from him and said only one thing. "Did you forget our promise?" And you know what he said? He laughed. Laughed. "Come on, man. Things change." I left without another word. I bought that shop alone. Ran it alone. It was hard, but I did it. And you know what? It made me stronger. Years passed, and one day William showed up at my shop's doorstep. He looked different now, not as confident, not as sure of himself. He told me things hadn't gone the way he planned. The opportunities he thought he had, gone. The friends he had fun with, gone. And now he needed help. I looked at him, and I saw the same man who once shook my hand under that street lamp. But now he was someone who had broken his word, and in doing so had lost far more than just a business. He had lost trust, and trust, once broken, isn't something you can just ask to have back. I didn't turn him away out of spite. I didn't hold a grudge. But I told him something I hope he never forgot. A man who doesn't keep his word will never build anything that lasts. So, my friends, let me ask you, not just the big ones, not just when it's easy, but the small ones, the everyday ones? Do you follow through when you say you'll be there? Do you finish what you start? Do you make commitments you know you can keep, or do you make promises just to sound good in the moment? Because let me tell you something, keeping your word is not about perfection. It's not about always succeeding. It's about showing up. It's about being reliable. Think about the people in your life. Do you trust them because of what they say, or because of what they do? And now, ask yourself, would they say the same about you? I want to hear from you. Have you ever been let down by a broken promise? Or maybe someone kept their word when it mattered most? Share your story in the comments below. Let's talk about it. Let's learn from each other. Because in the end, our word is all we truly own. And if this message resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to the Mindful Sphere channel, because together, we uncover the lessons that make life richer, wiser, and more meaningful. 3. How someone handles power and advantage. The great Greek philosopher Plato once said, "The measure of a man is what he does with power." Throughout history, power has been the greatest test of character, not wealth, not status, but how one acts when they have control over others. In the 3rd century BC, the great Mauryan emperor Ashoka began his rule as a fierce warrior. His conquests left thousands dead, and his thirst for expansion seemed insatiable, but after witnessing the devastation of his own war, he transformed. Instead of continuing his reign through fear and domination, he chose to wield his power differently. He embraced compassion, justice, and wisdom, spreading Buddhism and advocating for peace. His reign became one of the most admired in history, not because of the wars he won, but because of how he chose to use his power once he had it. Ashoka could have continued ruling with an iron fist. Instead, he proved true strength is not found in control but in fairness. And that lesson still holds true today. If you want to know a person's character, don't watch how they act when they're struggling. Watch what they do when they have the upper hand. Now let me tell you a story, not one from a history book but from life itself. It happened in my small town many years ago. There were 2 men, James and Robert. They had been friends since childhood, growing up on the same dirt roads, learning the same lessons from the same old folks who had seen it all. They worked together at the same factory, side by side, sweating under the same sun, pushing through the same long shifts, and through it all they promised each other, if one of us ever makes it, we won't forget where we came from. Life, however, has a funny way of testing people. One day, the factory announced they needed a new foreman, someone to oversee the workers, manage the schedules, and make sure the company ran smoothly. It was a good job, better pay, better hours, and a real chance to step up in the world. Both James and Robert applied, but only one could get it, and it was James. Robert was happy for him, at least at first. He shook his hand, clapped him on the back, and said, "You deserve this, brother. Don't forget about us down here." James laughed. "How could I? We built this place together." And for a while, things stayed the same. James was still the same guy, still cracking jokes at lunch, still making sure everyone was treated fairly. But as time went on, something changed. The power started to take hold. It started small, James demanding longer shifts from his old co-workers while taking breaks whenever he wanted. Then it got worse, siding with the higher-ups, ignoring complaints, treating the very people he once stood beside as if they were beneath him. One day, Robert was called into James's office. He could tell from the way James sat in that big leather chair, the way he leaned back like he owned the place, that something had shifted between them. James folded his hands and said, "I need you to start working weekends, Robert. The company needs more production." Robert frowned. "Weekends? James, you know I got my mother to take care of." James shrugged. "It's just business." Robert looked at him long and hard, and for the first time, he saw not his childhood friend, but a man who had let power change him. And so, with nothing left to say, Robert nodded and walked out. The factory went on. James went on. And over the next few years he climbed even higher, moved up to management, got himself a big house, a fancy car. But something was missing. See, the higher he climbed, the fewer real friends he had. The workers who once laughed with him now only nodded when he walked by. The people he used to drink with after work didn't invite him anymore. He had power, but he had lost respect. Then, one day, the factory hit hard times. The owners were looking to cut costs, and James, despite all his loyalty, was let go. Just like that. The man who had once held all the authority was back where he started, except now he had no one to turn to, no one except Robert. James swallowed his pride, walked back into that same factory and found his old friend still working on the floor, and for the first time in years, James wasn't the one in charge. He hesitated, then said, "I need work, Robert, anything at all." Robert looked at him, long and hard, just as he had all those years ago in that office. And then, without hesitation, he said, "You start Monday." No anger, no resentment, just a simple act of mercy because Robert had never forgotten where he came from, and he had never let power change who he was. So, I ask you, how do you handle power? It's easy to be kind when you have nothing to lose, but what about when you have the upper hand? When you get promoted, do you lift others up or do you push them down? When you have control over a situation, do you stay fair or do you use it to serve yourself? When life gives you an advantage, do you use it for good or do you let it change you? Now, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever seen someone's true nature revealed when they got a little bit of power? Maybe you've even been in that position yourself. How did you handle it? Let's talk about it in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to the Mindful Sphere channel, because together, we explore the deep truths that shape our lives, truths that can make us wiser, stronger, and more aware of the world around us. At the end of the day, the real measure of a person isn't in their words, it's in their actions. If you want to know who someone truly is, don't listen to what they say, watch what they do. How do they treat people who can't offer them anything in return? Do they keep their promises, even when it's inconvenient? How do they behave when they hold power over others? These 3 simple but powerful clues will tell you more about someone's character than any grand speech or carefully curated image. Because character isn't about what we do when people are watching, it's about what we do when no one is. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a moment where someone's true nature was revealed, either for better or worse? Maybe an unexpected act of kindness, or a subtle but telling red flag? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because wisdom isn't just about what we learn, it's about what we share. And if this message resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to the Mindful Sphere channel, because together we uncover the truths that make life richer, wiser, and more meaningful. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next video.